Yeah. What is it about those songs with Foreigner that they've stood the test of time? Why is it that they're still just as relevant and fresh today as they were, 30 plus years ago?
Because they're great. I mean, you can't deny a great song stands the test of time, and the Foreigner catalog does. So, undoubtedly, they're great songs, and they were tremendous recordings. The performances were insane. All you can say is that it was really great, and that's a cool thing.
How do you find a balance between, playing the hits for the audience, but also not going through the motions as a performer?
How do I find a balance? Because I'm very, very passionate about music, and because I love music, and when I play, it just, it's very natural for me. I love it. So, I can't. I'm not faking it. It's the real deal. I just love it. Great music. I can play a million times, and I love it.
Yeah. Well, I had heard in an interview you did that when you grew up, you were part of a railroad family.
That's true. Yeah.
I was curious about how much that image of the train, of what it represents in terms of traveling and freedom, how did that affect the trajectory of your life?
Wow. Deep question. I like that. Well, I think, it's funny because I did travel a lot. I lived in a lot of places before I settled down. I've been, my last two homes I lived in, the first one for 17 years, and where I've been now, I've been for almost 15. So, but I did a lot of moving around as a kid, because my dad was in the railroad, and then my stepdad, after my dad passed away, my stepdad got moved around a bit. So I've done a lot of moving around, and that's kind of a cool thing. But it definitely, I think what it does is it just makes you really appreciate when things are right. And I have a big appreciation for that.
Yeah. Where does your work ethic come from? You always seem to be involved in so many different projects, and you've always been able to find work and thrive in whatever project you are involved in.
I'm a Midwestern boy, so I think I think a lot of the work ethic comes from that. Plus, I'm just really passionate about music. I love music, and I love to make music as much as I can. And it's never lost on me that I'm very fortunate in getting to do what I do. So I think all those things kind of combined make me feel that way.
Yeah. Do you remember the first day you rolled into Los Angeles and how the first impressions initially compared to what you had imagined it would be?
Wow. My first impression was, wow, this is paradise. Because L.A. in the early 80s was, rock was coming back, and it was exciting, and there was a lot of girls all over the place, and it was a great place to be. So I remember my exact impression being like, wow, this is even more spectacular than I thought it would be, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, as someone who experienced the success in the wild 80s, I guess, what was your biggest takeaway from it, though? Was there any memory to you that summed up that era?
Was there any memory that summed up that era? Wow. It was a lot like what people say. There was parties every night. There, hanging out at the Rainbow. The bands were all buddies and friends. There was a lot of drinking and drugs too,
yeah.
Which perhaps not such a good thing. But it was part and parcel of just a lot of fun, wild scene. I can't think of any particular stories really, because kind of every day was a story. So, but it was not that far away from what you'd imagine.
Well, to that point, though, when you were involved in the film Rockstar, how much did that experience hit too close to home for you?
Well, a lot. One of the cool things about that movie is that the director was really, really amazing, and he used to ask us things. He'd say like, "Would this have happened?" Or there's some liberties taken, as movies always do, but for the most part, he tried to keep it pretty close, and he would sort of rely on us to kind of give him a check on reality on a lot of it, which I thought was really cool. So a lot of that movie, I think, is pretty close to real life.
Yeah. Well, I was curious, though, with the end of that era in terms of the end of that kind of scene, was it inevitable, or was it somewhat a self-sabotage by the scene itself?
I think really what it was is the music got very stale. I mean, all the records started to sound the same. There was such a formula about it. Everybody had to have, you had your rock song, and then you had your big power ballad, and, I mean, it just got too formulaic, and I think people started seeing through it. People know authenticity when they see it. I think it kind of brought about its own doom for that reason. Of course, then things went way the other way, but definitely the fact that it got stale was, I think, responsible for the killing of the scene.
Yeah. Well, when I was looking through your bio, it had mentioned that you come from, at least growing up, loving of prog rock. I was wondering what your thoughts were about the influences you might have had from Greg Lake and maybe Chris Squire as well.
Well, they were both huge influences on me. Huge. Squire, when I first heard Roundabout, I changed the way I played everything. The minute I heard it, I went, that's what I want to do. And I just totally got into that sound and that whole thing. I mean, it just consumed me. I loved Yes, and I loved Chris Squire's bass playing. Still do. I mean, I still think he was one of the greatest of all times. Just so creative, so unique, so powerful, but so melodic. I mean, he really had it all. Anyway, so he was really influential. Greg Lake, I think he's underrated as a bass player, and there's a lot of great bass playing on those records. A lot of great bass playing. But then the fact is his voice and his songwriting, all really important things, and they had a huge influence on me.
Yeah. Well, what are you learning about the bass today? I mean, I know you've been playing it most of your life, but what are you discovering about that instrument maybe you hadn't noticed before, or it's just a new avenue you're going down?
Well, I think you get better with age because of the feel. Bass is a very feel-oriented instrument. It's all about how it feels, on your body and how you make other people feel and how the rest of the band gels together. So I think you get better at that over time. I'm not really concerned about chops anymore and, fancy playing. I mean, when that can happen, that's great. But it's more about just making the music feel good. And that's one of the great things about Foreigner, because, Foreigner music is really fun to make feel good.
Yeah.
And that makes the bass playing a lot of fun. So, I'd say I've just learned more and more how to make a band feel and sound better.
Well, I was saying, too, it must be one of those things where you're kind of looking to find the pocket rather than take the spotlight.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it, sure.
I mean, because you're the anchor. You and the drummer are the anchor of everything. You're leading the charge.
Right. That's right. It's definitely all about how you gel with the drummer, of course.
Now, you turned 60 in January. And
no, I turned 61.
Oh, 61. Oh, I guess your Wikipedia page is off then.
It's been off for many years, yes. I'm not going to correct it, by the way, but if you're going to say it, I might as well tell you I'm actually 61.
Okay. Well, I was wondering what your mindset is these days in terms of how you not only maybe view life itself, but maybe reflect on the road to here.
Wow. Well, I mean, I'm just really grateful that I'm able to play music and do what I love. That never gets lost on me. It's an honor to be able to do what I do. There's a lot of talented people out there that don't get to make their living playing music. And, because records have stopped selling to the degree they do, you really depend on live music for your living now. And that's not a bad thing because you get to play live, but it reminds you that there's only so many gigs out there.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky to be in a great band and doing what I do. And I think that I just want to learn the lessons of humility and being human. Not taking yourself so seriously anymore. I mean, there was a period where I think a lot of musicians took themselves way too seriously, and I think they did a lot of damage to their own careers, frankly, and to a lot of the people around them, and I don't want to do that. And so it's good to be in a position where I'm starting to understand a lot of those lessons and value those lessons.
Do you think that because you had that perception that's why you didn't become a victim of the scene?
Well, that, and I mean, I was fortunate in that I sobered up when I was pretty young, which helps.
Yeah.
I was 31 when I got sober, and I've been sober ever since, and I think that helps a lot too. Because when you commit yourself to getting sober, you commit yourself to honesty, and that's where a lot of self-reflection comes in.
Yeah. Was there ever a piece of advice you got that maybe you initially didn't regard, but now you kind of keep it close to yourself?
Well, I'll tell you about a piece of information that's not exactly what you're asking about, but something that did take effect right away, and it was a huge piece of advice. I don't think I'm giving any anonymity away, but when I was about 6 months sober, I was at a meeting, and I guess I guess because he's so known as being somebody that was an addict, I don't think I'm telling any tales, but David Crosby was at the meeting, and I was sharing about how, I was about 6 months sober, and I was just having a hard time getting myself back into the swing of music again. And he came up to me after the meeting, and he said, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Well, of course, you're David Crosby." And he said, "Let me give you a piece of advice." He said, I had the same problem. He said, and what I did was I just turned my schedule around. I was a nighttime person. I became a morning person. If you're a morning person, become a nighttime person. And approach it fresh. Just try it all new again. And I will tell you, the next day I started doing that. And I had been a night person. I would sleep till 2 or 3, 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And I changed it. And I started getting up early. And I'd have my coffee, and I'd go out and I'd start playing music. And sure enough, I fell in love with music again.
Yeah.
And to me, that was one of the greatest lessons and pieces of advice I ever got.
What is it about rock and roll that's why you wanted to make it your life?
Wow, I guess it's, like anybody, I started off with the same kind of, ideas about, getting girls and, the attention and the glory and all that stuff. That was definitely in there. But, I've always loved music, and there was always a very, very deep love of music behind everything. So, and now that's the driving force. That has had legs. That stayed when, I could care less about all the other junk now. But the music I still love, and I'm still very motivated by the music. And so I think it's the fact that there were some, superficial reasons for getting involved, but then over time, just the love of music took over, and that's what's given it longevity.
Yeah. Well, my final question is, you've had a life creating and performing music, and you've traveled the world and met people from all walks of life. I was curious about what for you, what has that taught you about what it means to be a human being?
It means that, you have to be thankful for every moment of life. Life can be very, very short. And, you just have to be grateful and appreciate health. You have to appreciate friends and family, and those are the things that are important. All the other junk, fame, fortune, all that stuff, like they say, money doesn't buy you happiness. All that stuff is real. That's not the kind of thing that's not what really makes you sleep well at night.
Yeah.
Listen, money is a great thing, and having money can be helpful, and it can certainly make life more convenient, but it doesn't make you happy. You have to make yourself happy, and you make yourself happy, I think, by focusing on things like family and friends and the things you're passionate about, and that's pretty much what I've learned.